Hi, I'm Rachel from the Black Lagoon, and I collect all things creature from the Black Lagoon. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or as I like to call it, the Creature Corner. This week in the Creature Corner, we're going to be talking about the oldest collectibles in my collection and the history behind them. And make sure you stick around until the end because we're going to be unboxing a vintage collectible that I've been on the search for years. But first, in case you are new here, a little background about me. I have been collecting all things creature from the Black Lagoon for just over 10 years now, and here in the Creature Corner I talk about everything from my collectibles to take you on creature-related adventures, talk about the history of the movies, and so much more, including sharing with you every week any creature-related histories that might have happened that week, and occasionally doing a deep dive into those histories. I post new videos here in the Creature Corner now every Thursday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are a fan of the Gillman or Universal Monsters. Now, this week in creature history, technically this first one is from last week, but even though I didn't post last week, I didn't want to skip this one. On March 27th in 1914, Richard Denning, who played Dr. Mark Williams in Creature from the Black Lagoon, was born in Poughkeepsie, New York. And although this isn't creature related, on April 1st in 1883, the man of 1,000 faces, Lon Chaney Sr., was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Happy heavenly birthday to them both from the Creature Corner. Now for this week's video, what is the oldest collectible in my creature collection? This was such a fun topic for me to research because it seemed like every time I was positive I knew what was the oldest thing in my collection, something would lead me to research another item in my collection to make sure I had it dated correctly. And it turned out I had a lot more things in my collection that predated the 1970s than I had originally thought. When I actually first ordered this, I thought for sure this was going to be the new creature collectible in my collection to hold the record for the oldest collectible in my collection. But then I remembered I do have a few creature magazines that could possibly challenge that theory, and it turns out one could, and that was this Monster World magazine from 1965. Monster World published magazines from November of 1964 until September of 1966, and it was considered to be the sister magazine to Famous Monsters of Filmland. Both magazines were published by the American magazine company Warren Publishing that was founded by James Warren, and both magazines were edited by Forrest J. Ackerman. Warren would go on to introduce monster comics to Monster World magazine, and this would be what would eventually lead to the creation of Vampirella just a few years later in 1969, which I thought was very interesting. There are so many great articles in this magazine, including one about the Munsters coach. But despite having a picture of the Gillman on the cover, there is actually not an article completely dedicated to the creature in this magazine. That's no bother to me though, because I really love all old monster magazines, and I especially love to see the old advertisements in these monster magazines. Oftentimes these advertisements will actually lead me to find the history behind some of my collectibles, and this magazine had an advertisement that did just that. In the middle of this magazine was an advertisement for something I have in my collection that I previously didn't have a date for. And that is this Creature Walks Among Us 8mm film. And it even had a way to order it. Which means if this magazine is from 1965, then this 8mm film would have to be from around 1965 as well. Possibly even a year earlier or maybe a year later, depending on the production and shipping timeline of these. I wish there were a date somewhere on this box, but I am so glad to now have the advertisement to be able to put a date to this item. It was so exciting for me to find the advertisement for this. This has been one of my favorite things in my collection. I actually randomly found it in an antique store, and I'm so glad that I didn't pass it by. But now, even with both of these being from 1965, neither would be the oldest thing in my creature collection. Honestly, until recently, I had no idea the oldest thing in my collection was the oldest thing in my collection. You see, after I got the comment recently asking if I had any of the Topps creature feature cards, it led me to discovering that I had this card in my collection that was gifted to me last year by a close friend of mine, and it turned out this is a Spook Stories card from 1961, making this the oldest creature collectible in my collection. It is said that Spook Stories trading cards were the very first monster cards to use classic monster photos on glossy paper. This card being from 1961 would make it part of the first series of cards Spook Stories would release. In total, there were 72 cards in the first series, and 11 of those cards were creature cards. This was such a fun and unexpected discovery. I never would have guessed how old this card was when it had first been gifted to me. I know I've said it before, but I really do need to get a proper trading card binder now to store this card in, as well as any future monster or creature cards that I get my hands on. Most of my creature collection is from 1990 to today, so finding vintage pieces that predate 1990 or even predate 1980 is my absolute favorite thing. Because the vintage collectibles become so much more rare as time goes on, and sometimes the history behind those collectibles can also be lost to time too. But now, even though I know for sure this isn't even close to being the oldest thing in my collection, it is still vintage and I have still been looking for it for so long. So let's unbox this vintage collectible and add it to the creature corner. Now, these do typically go for a pretty high price and are usually completely out of the budget for me, but because this one was a little damaged, it was going for so much less than they usually do. This collectible is an original Ben Cooper creature mask from 1976. I was just so happy to find one of these that I could afford that I don't even mind at all that it is a little damaged. In fact, I think it gives it some character, and it even shows just how loved it was over the years. He's a little misshapen and there is a rip in the bottom of the chin of the mask, but he has the original price tag, and so that makes up for any of the damage. I do plan on doing my best to restore this mask to its former glory, and I do plan on doing a lot of research on how to restore a mask before I do anything so that I don't cause any further damage to it. So keep an eye out for a video all about this restoration in the future. And if you have any tips on how to restore this, please leave them in the comments. Any advice would be super appreciated. I think he's going to look so great here in the creature corner with my other creature masks and with the Ben Cooper creature figures from NECA. Now let me know in the comments, do you have any vintage creature or universal monster collectibles in your collections? And if you do, tell me some of your favorites. I'll see you back here in the creature corner next Thursday, and keep your eye out for some Monster Mail short and long format videos coming very soon. Goodbye!